This is the Into the Paddock podcast.
You look at it from just the results and you think this must be one of the McLaren's best days and weekends in motorsport. You know, Norris sweeps every session of qualifying. McLaren get a 1-2 finish. It should be, this is amazing. This is the pinnacle of our climb back up to competitiveness after 10 years of not winning. And yet all we're talking about is politics because of a very badly mismanaged situation. And this comes from, so Lando got pole ahead of Piastri. Piastri got the lead down into turn one and pulled away quite comfortably. I mean, it was helped that Lando was held up behind Max for a little bit, but nevertheless. But then everything started going awry when the team had to make a decision about the pit stops. The final pit stop sequence, they elected to pit Lando, who was running second, first, to protect him from an undercut from the likes of Lewis and Max behind him. As a result, he would take the lead when Piastri pitted a couple laps later. This is where it spiraled. So Lando, I don't believe, was under any kind of assumption that he would have to give Oscar his position back. I've undercutted him. I'm now in the lead. I'm going to win this race. Oscar and the team, however, believed that they were going to invert the positions to give Oscar back his lead because they only pitted Lando first to stop him from losing second. You're now in first, move back to second. And what we then had for the remainder of the race was political discourse carried out via radio, as the team basically brought in a negotiator to try and bring Lando down and get him to switch positions.
It sounded like a telenovela. Please, for the relationship, I'm begging you.
It was... So it's a difficult one, because from Norris's point of view, I can understand it, unless the caveat to all of this is if in the driver's briefing they had discussed this scenario and Lando decided to go against it. But from Norris's point of view, I get it. You're the leading car in the championship of the McLaren duo, although Piastri is now very much in it. He even said himself, I'm fighting for a championship here. He needs every point he can get. The team chose to undercut me. I didn't choose to. The team have undercutted me, have chosen to put me in first. I am now in the lead. Oscar can't keep up with me. I'm going to win this race. From Oscar's point of view, it's bullshit.
The Jedi are evil.
I took the lead at turn one. I was in control of this race. The team had to make a decision to protect the other car, and it's ended up with him leading. I should be winning this race. I get that too. And the team, meanwhile, are just like, oh, fuck. Like, what do we do? We're in a 1-2 situation. Both of our drivers are still technically in championship contention, but you need to sort this now because it's only going to get worse if you don't sort it. So eventually Norris capitulated. He said after the race that he was always going to let the position back, but he didn't feel the need to reassure the team, which that's just a silly attitude to have. Oscar said he was always confident that Lando was going to give it back. Was he? Fuck. What do we think? In my opinion, this was neither the fault of neither of the driver. I don't like Lando's attitude to this situation. However, I understand it. For me, the fault lies with the team for putting them in a position. They should have just pitted Piastri first.
Okay, I'm going to say this about McLaren. 2 wrongs do not make a right. McLaren made 2 huge mistakes. First, pitting Lando when he was in undercut range of his teammate, which you don't do that if you're the team just wants to get constructors points. That's all they're focused on. They obviously don't seem to care about the drivers' championship at this point for either driver. And then they realize their mistake, so then they try to force a team order situation to revert back, even though it boggled my mind how much they were flubbing this up. This undermines McLaren's or the driver's confidence, both Lando and Oscar's. This undermines their confidence in McLaren as an organization to go out and be consistent winners and contend for championships. If they can't even manage a race correctly, like when they're battling for 5th and 6th, yes, this situation, it doesn't matter. But when it's for wins for these young, hungry, talented drivers who finally have the fastest car, then that is where these types of decisions matter the most. They have to either keep the status quo, keep Lando number one, Oscar number two, or go do it by their championship position, but they cannot have this type of mistake and then second controversial decision to try to undo the mistake really quickly and hope no one notices. Everybody noticed. This is egg on the face of McLaren, which should, as you said, be a momentous occasion for them.
Yeah, I think this. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's awful, so long as they manage the fallout the right way. I think the timing of this coming at basically just after. I think we're just over halfway through the season now. The calendar's too long.
Before half.
And yeah, if they manage this right and they've had this team tension drama now, when they're still doing the chasing and they're not having to defend a championship lead, I think this whole situation could actually be very beneficial for them going forward, so long as everybody works in the best interests of the team and not themselves. If this situation allows the team to fully define, look, if this happens again, this is what we're going to do, then the next time a situation happens like this and it is more critical than it was this weekend, then they're going to be able to make the right decision. It purely comes down to, yeah, it's bad in the moment, but if they manage it well, this could have been a good thing for them going forward. The only way we're going to know what's going to happen from this relationship is watching the rest of the season. It's going to be a really interesting dynamic, because I don't think we've had it for a long time where two drivers who are so new to the world of winning, let alone to the world of competing for a championship, are now thrust into it, and both are equally as competitive and able to do it as each other. At the moment, McLaren have the fallback that Lando is ahead of Oscar in the championship, but Oscar's only 40 points behind Lando in the championship, I think, or something like that. It's not far. So he's just, a couple of one bad race for Lando, and all of a sudden Oscar's on equal terms with him. And to be quite honest, I feel more confident in Oscar's ability to manage difficult situations than I do Lando. So it's going to be a really interesting dynamic going forward. What I hope is that they don't trip over each other and allow Max to hold on. And yeah, I think all of that is going to come. This has been the first true test of the McLaren team's leadership and the two drivers' relationship with each other and their leadership. The conversations that we're not hearing back at the McLaren Technology Centre right now are going to be what determines whether this relationship works for the rest of the year, or whether it turns into a Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg situation.
Yeah, I think there's one thing in this whole equation that we're not really taking into account here in this conversation, and that is Zach Brown. Right. I think if there's any team runner on the grid who can take a bad situation and make it okay, and take a team and really solidify the cohesion and get these guys to behave, I think it's Zach Brown. Right. He just seems to me like that kind of person who's really good at conflict resolution, who's really good at instilling confidence in people and all that. If Zach Brown were to walk up to me and give me a compliment, I would believe him. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just seems like that kind of person. So I think, I don't think this is going to be a huge issue for McLaren because of their highest point of leadership, right? I think he's fully capable of bringing in the situation and making it, he's the type of person that could even make this turn into an advantage, right? Like take that and put that anger out on the track.
And I do wonder, had he been in Hungary, how this situation might have gone differently, because he was in Toronto for the IndyCar race. I feel like at that point where there was this ongoing radio exchange between Norris and his engineer, had Andrea or Zach got on the radio and said, look, do this, I wonder if that would have been the final, leadership authority symbol that would have calmed the whole situation down, or at least pushed it out of the public view. But that's a very good point. Of all of the team leaders in Formula One right now, I think Zach has the greatest authority over his stable. So I feel more confident in him than I would over Toto or Christian, to be sure. So
the one thing that rubs me wrong about both the McLaren and the Red Bull situation is just like the weaponized emotional blackmail that both teams put on their drivers. This is the most unprofessional I've seen any two teams in F1 be with their drivers over the radio during a race. Like, this is all the stuff that should be happening inside the trailers for debriefs. We had it played internationally on live television, how teams are trying to, like I said, emotionally manipulate their drivers to do what they want, or to I really found that part distasteful, and especially with McLaren and Lando, how they champion mental health. Like, this left a bad taste in my mouth.
I wouldn't go that far with McLaren. I think the Red Bull situation, they've been doing it for years and it's not working. I think McLaren found themselves in a situation that was brought on because of Lando and his refusal. You know, it was them that put Lando in the position, but Lando exacerbated it by not making his intentions clear. I think, to label it emotional blackmail, I mean, yeah, I suppose, but all of Tom Stallard's points were valid. Yes, it's stuff that should be going on in the team briefing, either before or after the race, but it wasn't. They had to make it. They had to do something. And, you know, he was saying he was doing it to protect Lando. I feel that's true, because Lando's reputation within the team would have gone down quite severely had he won that race. And he's right. To win a championship, you need the team behind you and you need your teammate. And if you screw over Oscar now, if you're in that situation again, Oscar ain't going to help you out. So, yeah, it was not nice to hear it over the radio, but it's either do that or have a very, very toxic environment post-race that you've then got to deal with instead. So, again, I think it's just going to be how they handle this one situation. If it carries on from here, then they've got a problem. But something makes me think they might have this under control. We're just going to have to find out. I think what's going to be interesting is the first time they actually have to race each other for position and the gloves come off. That's when we're going to learn a lot about how this relationship is going to be. Because at the moment, it seems okay. And whilst Lando did some strange things after the race, which I wasn't particularly fond of his attitude, like when Lewis was complimenting him on his fast car, and Lando was like, yeah, well, you had a fast car for 7 years, and got all defensive, didn't like that. Lando, and, you know, he was the first up to Piastri to congratulate him after the race. He was quite chummy with him on the podium and in Parc Fermé. Lando behaved there okay. So I think the situation's salvageable. We're not at Red Bull levels yet.
This is the Into the Paddock podcast.